Hey everyone, I'm Justin Fiedler, and this is DIRTRACKR Conversations. With Tyler Courtney's recent move to the winged sprint car ranks, there's been a lot of talk about drivers migrating away from the non-wing side. One driver who has bucked that trend, though, is Paul Nienhiser. The 2019 MOWA Sprint Car champion started driving winged 410s when he was 15 and has been nearly exclusively a winged guy in the years since. That was until very recently. Paul is currently in his rookie season with the USAC National Sprint Car Series, driving for KO Motorsports as a teammate to Chase Stockon. He currently sits 10th in the USAC National Points and is coming off an up-and-down weekend in Pennsylvania. He joins me on this episode to talk about his transition and getting the opportunity, gaining experience out on the national tour, why he made the move, where we will see him again in a winged car, and a lot more. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Paul Nienhiser. Paul, we're at a point where everyone is talking about non-wing guys transitioning to winged racing. Obviously, the main example of that this season being Tyler Courtney. But all of a sudden, we have you out here who's been a winged competitor now going non-wing racing. So walk me through the decision process to go kind of be a full-time non-wing guy.
Honestly, there wasn't really a big decision to it. I've actually, believe it or not, I think this is going on 10 years running 410 wing cars. And just maybe, I wouldn't say I just never really had an opportunity, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And I've just kind of dabbled my feet the last maybe 2 seasons, running literally like 3 or 4 races just to maybe open a door, and got the opportunity to race with KO Motorsports at Kokomo last October for the wing and non-wing doubleheader. And, they were, I guess, transitioning to a 2-car USAC team, and the way everyone gelled, and it just kind of went from there. About a week after Kokomo, they asked me if I wanted to be their guy. So they're a first-class operation and have a lot of great equipment and put in all the hard work. So for me, it's basically only driven for myself for a number of years now. It's pretty humbling to be in a position to drive for these guys.
I feel like the first opportunity or the first time I heard about you running a non-wing car was that MOWA War weekend last year in September, where you won the MOWA show and then finished second in the War race. How much non-wing racing had you done? I know you just said you've done a couple a year, but is this something you've been doing for a long time? Where were you kind of sneaking these in?
No, I think it's been, so if you're talking last year, so I think 2 years prior now, I ran a non-wing 410 race at Jacksonville, like on a Sunday afternoon or something. First time ever. It was literally a wing car without wings. I didn't know enough about it. And I ran third. And then I was going to run the Hocket that fall, wing and non-wing, 360, 410 non-wing, and had a problem with the car or something. So I didn't even really end up running non-wing that night. So then the following year, you're talking Granite City there. The MOWA War race was, I guess, maybe my second non-wing race. And then we ended up breaking a fuel pump later that year at Lake of the Ozarks for their non-wing national thing. And I think it was Labor Day, 4th of July weekend. And we were leading that. So, I had a pretty good couple 3 starts. And then I went and ran for the KO Motorsports guys, like I said, in October. And here we are. I've ran already more races this year than I have in my career non-wing.
What drew you to non-wing racing? Was it just the challenge of it? Was it just that it was something different? Why did you want to go do that?
Just something different. Like I said, I'm not an old guy. I'm 24, but I've been doing wing 410 stuff for 10 years, and it was a new challenge, something kind of like uncharted territory for me. So I don't know. I've run the Chili Bowl a handful of times with some pretty good car owners too. And it just seemed to be something that I think wing racing could maybe help guys in a way. It's a different discipline. The way you race and the momentum and how you slide job and make passes is altogether different for me. But I think the speeds of wing racing helps me. So I just kind of always enjoyed it. And just here or there, I kind of started looking for spots where maybe if I could take my backup car without wings, I could run a non-wing race. And that's pretty much it. I didn't really have a reason. Obviously, wing racing pays a little bit better, especially now. But like I said, just a humbling opportunity, and one I felt like at this stage in my career, without really having a ride or running a team, running for a team like this, I felt like it was kind of now or never.
I feel like we've heard from a lot of guys that the winged car versus the non-wing car, it's like a completely different style of driving. And there's maybe not a lot that goes back and forth. How long did it take you to get comfortable, once you kind of jump in and start running some non-wing races?
Yeah, not too long, really. I think part of that's due to a little bit of midget experience before that. I think midgets are probably honestly more like wing cars than non-wing sprint cars are. But not too long. And we went down to Florida this February for my first, like real non-wing season. I was in a true non-wing car that these guys, Fleet Ruzic builds these things. So we did a little bit of testing there. I probably made 100 laps before we actually qualified Thursday night in Florida back in February. And honestly, by the end of that, I was pretty comfortable. I mean, I've run enough laps and raced enough that I can kind of pick up on things maybe quicker than if I was a 15, 16-year-old kid coming into this like 10 years ago when I got into wing cars.
You joined KO Motorsports and they have a driver in Chase Stockon who's obviously had a ton of success in non-wing stuff. How much have you been able to kind of rely on him for information and advice and things like that as you've gotten started here?
He's probably a little tired of me sometimes when we get to the racetrack. I asked him, the USAC schedule for me, I traveled a little bit wing racing, but more or less Indiana is all non-wing racing, which is a lot of the USAC schedule. So most of these tracks I haven't been to. So when we get there, I mean, I'll watch a little bit of video and see how they raced maybe the year or two prior, and just kind of start asking Chase like what he's been doing in the past. He's been on the tour, right? He's the Iron Man, so he's been more starts than anybody. And I just kind of ask him, maybe how things race, how things are early. And for me, I'm getting more comfortable in the car, and kind of when I come to a new racetrack, I can kind of gauge how hard I can drive the thing. And maybe when I bounce an idea off of him before I get in it, it just gives me that little bit of reassurance.
You've had a ton of success with different series, Sprint Invaders and MOA. You've run Outlaw shows. Where does the USAC National Sprint Car Series, like in terms of competition, rate amongst those other ones? I mean, against the World of Outlaws or the All-Stars. I feel like when you kind of look at the names at the top of the sprint cars, and you start talking about Justin Grant and Brady Bacon and CJ Leary and Kevin Thomas Jr. and all these guys, you have this really solid kind of nucleus of guys. And I'm wondering if that competition level is high with USAC as it is with some of the other series you've raced with.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, those guys you just mentioned, they're all ones to beat. And as a guy that would just check Twitter and stuff the following day and see recaps and results of USAC, any kind of non-wing racing, I mean, these are names that you'd see winning all the time. So guys like automatically come in respecting a lot and their ability, and they're all in good equipment. So, I think like with any traveling series, you've got 9 or 10 really solid cars that go everywhere. And honestly, it surprised me this year, the USAC, the first 4 or 5 races, I think we were at like 40 cars every single night. So again, everyone really anywhere has really good equipment. And whether you're in Indiana, Florida, guys have little, tracks can be kind of their like home track, and they've got a lot of success at. Just kind of like with me at Jacksonville, for example, you got guys that just trickle in that maybe only race there, but they could be really tough to beat. So I think that, it's maybe been a little bit surprising for me as stout as it has been. But I think we've also, as a team, exceeded our expectations a little bit too.
You caught my attention at Lawrenceburg here not long ago. You ran top 5 and ended up 7th, and your suspension was broken. The front end, I think, was bouncing around all over the place. But as you kind of look over this early part of the season, how would you kind of rate how it's gone for you so far? Obviously, you've had some good runs. You struggled a little bit in Pennsylvania over the weekend, but then rebounded, later in the weekend. So where would you kind of rate things?
It's tough to say. I don't want to give us too good of a grade, but I don't think we've done bad either. I would say somewhere in the B range. I really, truthfully, I have a lot of confidence in myself, but coming into this year, like I said, with a handful of non-wing starts, I just knew it was going to be really tough, going just straight to the national tour. So when we had made every show until this past Friday night, when we wrecked out and just couldn't, with 40 plus cars a night, I think said a lot about us. And like you said, we ran really well. Like Lawrenceburg, I'd never been there in a wing car either. So we've exceeded expectations, had just little things here and there that we don't have the results to show, but I'd say somewhere in the B range. And I think, rebounding the way we did this weekend, as an outsider, we probably didn't make hardly any noise on the results sheets or anything like that. But, knowing how hard the guys worked, nobody got their heads down and just was very gritty. And all the way to the end there Sunday night, I think will, pay dividends here as the year goes on.
This kind of idea of jumping back and forth between car types, and especially jumping back and forth between car types in a single night, how difficult is that as a driver? And obviously you've done it very well at times. We're talking about that MOA and War show. But how difficult is that to go back and forth with a wing versus not a wing?
I think when I run a wing car first, I've just gone really, really fast around that racetrack. So then when you get in a non-wing car, Not that they're any less, there's not any less horsepower or anything to be had there, but you are going around the track slower, lap time wise. So I think that helps me kind of dissect what I'm doing as I'm making those circles. But it is, you kind of have to study it a little bit before you do it. I feel like, cause you have to understand, the way starts and restarts go without a wing versus with the wing and less downforce, the way you make passes, the way that the racing is a lot closer non-wing racing than wing racing. You just kind of have to, I think, in your own head, kind of tell yourself what you're doing as the green flag drops. So that way they don't kind of get crisscrossed a little bit.
I want to jump back, a little ways in your career here. And I know you were a micro guy coming up and then transitioned to sprint cars. Is it true that you at 15 literally went from a micro to a 410 sprint car?
That is true. Yeah, actually, I guess I ran a micro. Yeah, I was 15. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Because as I was looking kind of at your bio and seeing it was like micro, and then 410. And like, was that something that was just a massive transition? Obviously very different race car types, but how did that go?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. The mini sprints now, it's common, the Engler mechanical fuel injection. I was like the first one to have that on my micro. So we did a lot of the R&D testing, and Tim Engler is a former sprint car driver, tractor puller, everything like that. And I was just racing with my mom and dad at the time, and we actually blew several engines, and micro racing was getting really expensive. And we were looking at guys that had been running micros and were racing sprint cars, and we're like, man, this just makes more sense, really. And I told Tim that, and he actually had his last car he ever drove back in his horse barn behind the shop. And he said, here, you find you a motor, I've got a car for you. So I ended up, dressing that thing up. I found a couple 410s, and the speed was tough to get used to at first, but really, everyone else out there is going the same speed as you too. So it wasn't too bad. And I've been fortunate to run quite a few races every year. And just after a little while, you get comfortable enough. It's kind of like riding a bike.
What was your first 410 start?
I think it was actually right here in Jacksonville. It didn't go very well. I remember I was kind of like on the outside of somebody, and I took like a right rear to left front and broke a front axle. And I don't remember if we ran the feature that night or not, but it wasn't anything spectacular.
Do you remember, like, maybe it was a test or an opportunity to get in a 410 for the first time? Was it like really kind of mind blowing to make that jump?
Yeah, I was kind of always a smaller kid. I'm not so much now. I was like a late bloomer, I guess I'd say. So I was 15. I actually went down to Kennedale Speedway Park and Smiley's Racing Products. They had like a driving school or whatever, and I made some laps down there. And granted, I was on the track by myself, but I was kind of nervous. Just a big car is twice as big as a wheelbase as a micro. It's just, I don't know, 4 or 5 times the amount of horsepower. So it was nerve wracking, but I also never have been too nervous of a person. I just kind of tell myself to sack up, and I've always just kind of gone out and done whatever needs to be done. So it wasn't too bad.
What was your first World of Outlaws start?
I believe it was the Ironman. And
oh, dang.
Yeah. So Peebly's actually I made my first feature there and everything. So it's kind of just always been one of my favorite tracks.
Is that like a situation where was that a planned start, or were you sitting around going, we should tow to Peebly and see what we could do?
I can't take you through that thought process at the time. I think we were racing a MOA race or something in the area, like Granite City, Illinois or something. They're like 30 minutes apart. And I believe Mike Hess even at the time was running some MOA races. And I think we all towed over there together. It just worked out with the schedule. We were half hour away and just kind of made sense for Saturday. I'm pretty sure.
You are a guy that's run, like I mentioned before, Sprint Invaders MOA, 2019 MOA champion. Tell me about that series and why that was something that you ran a bunch of and have run a bunch of.
Well, if you look at the schedule, there's a lot of races in Jacksonville. And like I told you here, maybe before we opened, but I live right here in Jacksonville. So being very centrally located for a small team with a fairly short radius as far as where their schedule goes, it just made sense for me, especially when I was younger, to not have to travel as much and still get, 20, 25 races in a year. I've got several local sponsors that have been on my side of my race car since I was 9 years old too. So it's kind of nice to be able to race around here for those guys. And obviously there's plenty of off weekends, So we would go run the World of Outlaw races, all-star races. What made sense? I'm not going to be sitting here on a Friday night with nothing to do and say, well, we got a race, we need to go to Williams Grove. That just doesn't make financial sense. So I haven't been a huge traveler, but where it made sense, where we could get 2 or 3 races in, that's just kind of what I've always done.
Do you have a job outside of racing?
I do. Yeah. I actually went to school to be an engineer for 3 years. And then coming up on about a year and a half now, I've opened a small business. I'm a powder coating and fabrication shop. And I also work a seasonal highway maintainer job for the state of Illinois. And I grew up on a farm. So I wear a lot of hats.
Nice. That engineering background, I feel like there's a few guys kind of floating out there, and Shane Golobic is one that comes to mind that has an engineering background. Do you think that helps you as a sprint car driver?
I don't really know. I think parts of it, maybe. The number side of it, maybe. I can't really say, most of the classwork I had was like on machining stuff, which I don't really machine anything myself, designing stuff. I didn't really have any like shock expertise type classes or things I think would benefit a lot. But, obviously, you had some pretty big numbers thrown around. And I feel like, honestly, I just feel like we were building bridges and stuff. So not really.
10-4. Are you running the Outlaw show this week at Jacksonville? I'm assuming you are.
Well, unfortunately, my grandmother on my mother's side lost a fight with cancer last week. So here this afternoon, I'm headed down to Houston for her funeral. Happens to be Thursday, so we'll be absent, unfortunately, here this week.
Tell me about Jacksonville. Kenny is a guy that I've had lots of conversations with, and we had him back on Open Red back in the day, and he's obviously a guy that's done a lot there at Jacksonville, but especially growing up or being around that racetrack as much as you have been. Tell me about that racetrack.
Well, it's really remarkable what Kenny and his entire team have done. I can remember being a kid, first or second grade, going out here watching sprint car racing, and not that the racing was any better or worse than it is right now. But the facility is, I think, one of a kind here pretty well across the country. And the improvements they have made to the facility. I mean, you can't really go to a fairgrounds racetrack and it not be a fairly one-lane, half-mile racetrack. Granted, this is a bull ring with all kinds of action, and everyone now knows that. And now they've got like a fully air-conditioned, heated bar, nice bathrooms, just things that you don't find at a fairgrounds. And you add that in with awesome racing. I don't think there's another place in the country that's comparable to that.
What are we, if fans are going to tune in and watch that race this week, what can we expect in terms of racing? What's it going to take to be successful there?
Definitely staying out of trouble. I mean, it's a short track, so things can happen in front of you and not be your fault, and it's pretty hard to keep your nose clean. So I think it's probably a 40-lap race too. So it's a long time. Definitely, historically, at least the last few years, the fastest way around has been just running your right on the fence. So as a driver, that can be tough to do repeatedly 40 times around too. And you get into lap traffic in a hurry too. So picking your spots, keeping your nose clean, obviously with the outlaw format, you got to qualify well too, just to start out front. So a number of things need to go your way, and some of the things can be controlled and some of it can just be dumb luck.
How does that track kind of sit in terms of like the local area there? Is that like kind of the place to be on the weekends?
I think it pretty well is. Yeah. There's nowhere around here. There's several Illinois Fairgrounds racetracks, but I think Jacksonville's kind of set themselves apart the last few years with the improvements at the facility. And the racing has just been phenomenal. And they put on several big shows with late models too. So more or less their crowds are awesome. They got awesome fans locally. I know there's a lot of people that travel because they hear about the place and want to come in here and watch some racing. So I think it's the happening place. I don't know if they've been allowed to sell out, but I'm sure they would otherwise without any restrictions. And that's pretty well how it is all the time.
I was looking at your schedule. What do you have coming up besides the USAC stuff? Are you going to try to sprinkle in some wing stuff here at the rest of the season? Are you running your own wing car? Or do you have another wing car that you're going to run? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the KO Motorsports team has a couple of John Deere wing cars, and we ran those at Hopstad, I guess, a couple weeks ago. I don't really know when we'll be breaking those out again. My full commitment this year is with those guys, with USAC. It's something that they've put a lot of heart and money into, and I want to give them as much as I can back. I do have my wing car sitting here ready to go, like this Thursday. If circumstances were different, I would have been running it. And any breaks we have in the season, I'll probably be driving my car a little bit. I've also run for Scott Boner up in Iowa in the the Midland Performance 50 car. And I think we'd like to run a few 360 races too. So just, we got to have USAC. And then outside of that, I'm just kind of filling stuff in. I don't really have a set schedule.
Is it possible that we could see you in the wing car and the non-wing car at Eldora?
That's been talked about. I'm not sure. We haven't shaken it down or anything yet. So we'll see what happens. I had somebody just ask me that this morning, actually. So we'll see. I actually really do like Eldora. So I wouldn't rule that out anyways.
You've had some good runs at Chili Bowl in the past, and I know that's something you talked about. You didn't run the Chili Bowl this season. Is that something you'd want to do more of? And would you be open to running midget races?
Yeah, and that's another thing that kind of this USAC decision making for me, what kind of played into it, I guess. Hopefully, I don't think people really took me very seriously, like showing up at the Chili Bowl, and I was fortunate to drive for the Loyettes, Joe Roos Evans, the Newmans, all great equipment, and we did well. But I think people easily forget about your run on Saturday in the C or B main when you're not really a headliner. So I think running a non-wing car on the national tour with a little bit bigger platform will hopefully help me. And that's something I want to do. If you could run the USAC sprints, midgets, Silver Crown, even, that's something I'd love to do. But I think I just have to have myself out there more to be taken seriously, or maybe considered for a ride, rather than a wing guy from Illinois that runs some outlaw races. That's kind of like my resume. So hopefully this will open some doors for me as well. And, I just missed Chili Bowl. It was a weird year this year. So really, really hoping to be back next year.
I'm curious about like kind of your general exposure and being around winged racing as long as I have. Obviously, I know about you from that part of it, but MOA and some of the series you've run are obviously not like well covered in terms of streaming and some of the other things. Yeah. Do you think it'll make a difference for you, or has it made a difference for you being able to be in USAC shows, running some big shows on flow racing? Do you see that helping you and personal brand is like a terrible way to look at it, but you're following at the very least?
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of people, even, like you said, you'd heard of me from wing racing, but we go out to Indiana, and Thomas Meserol was telling me people were asking him like who I was or something at Lawrenceburg, like thought I was a legit rookie that had never ran a sprint car and was out there racing pretty decent. And I think that is going to create either a larger following or just know abouts of me, I guess. And obviously the streaming, the Dirt Visions, the Flow Racing, forgetting some other ones. I'm sure it's just huge for everybody, for sponsors, for series, for racetracks. It just brings a lot more eyes to the sport. And I think the USAC and All-Stars being on Flow Racing, there's a ton of people watching every night. So if you're up there in the mix, people are going to hear your name and hopefully remember you.
I talked about this. So I do a daily show. I do, 8 to 10 minutes Monday through Friday, just talking about a bunch of different stuff. And the thing that I kind of am going to start asking guys about, and actually you're the first guy that I'm going to ask about this, but the idea about championships in dirt racing, and we see guys, and my kind of bigger point was about late models and watching some of these guys kind of fall off the national tours and just kind of chase checks and big trophies and things like that. From where you sit, at least in sprint cars and in the open wheel world, do you think that championships matter? I mean, do they matter to you as a driver? Is that something you want, or are you like, I just want to go earn money and win as much as I can, and if the championships happen, so be it?
Do they matter? Yes. I think especially as far as legacies go, that's what a lot of people measure up to, is how many championships did so-and-so win in whatever series or multiple series. Do they matter to me? Not as much. They're definitely probably the hardest thing to win. You got to put a lot of nights together, and a lot of variables go into, a successful season and beating out the best drivers. If you're talking these national series, like we were talking about, there's 9 or 10 teams that are absolutely capable of doing it. I guess I'm kind of forgetting the last part of your question, or maybe that was it, but to me, they don't matter as much. No.
So, and that was just it. It was just like, do they matter? And is it more important to you to go out and win races and that part of it versus the actual kind of trying to chase the championships? And I know a lot of guys don't ever even have the opportunity to go chase a championship, but it just seems like, in the stick and ball world and in some of the places, I'm have had my own NASCAR career. And so kind of existing in the NASCAR world, it's like the championships are just this kind of nonstop thing that gets talked about. And it just seems like on the dirt side, it's not as big of a deal. And at least it doesn't seem to get talked about as much. And so it's like, that was kind of the genesis of the thought, but yeah, just curious what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, no, I'd just say that, like guys like Kyle Larson, how many races did he win last year that are super hyped up and talked about that did not, go into a championship at all? So I think, I don't think they matter as much. I think the crown jewels and the fans, the hype of a big weekend, you go win one of those big crown jewel, large check races. I think that probably sticks with fans more, in my opinion.
Do you think too, then, like, is there almost like a hierarchy? Does it mean more like if you were to go out and win a World of Outlaws championship, like, is that something like if you had the opportunity, then all of a sudden it means more? I feel like we've watched Brad Sweet and Donnie Schatz obviously battle it out here the last couple of years, and it seems like it means a lot to Brad. Yeah,
I think it does. And I think he's done an incredible job. Their whole race team has, of becoming, Donnie's been nearly unstoppable for 10 years now. And now they are kind of the next unstoppable kind of dynasty I could see coming through. And I'm sure you could ask Donnie and those guys. I have no idea what it would take or what mentally and physically, financially went into all those championships. But, it's highly respected by me, and I'm sure a ton of other people too.
I'll let you go here pretty quick. I'm curious, when you kind of look at your career and what's next, where would you like to get to?
I can't really answer that, Justin. I feel like most of my career has been a lot of could haves, like very close finishes or mechanical failures that just some big races I had a chance to be in the hunt for. I never did. And maybe that's part of the opportunities that never came about to this point. But, going forward, I just want to drive race cars. I don't care if they have a wing on it, without a wing. I don't care if it's 4 cylinders or 8 cylinders. I would obviously love to continue to be able to do some type of national tour or, run 40, 50 races a year. I'm actually married now and having a kid, so life's kind of changing for me too, but I don't have any intentions to stop racing.
Well, I certainly appreciate the time today. Give me the plug zone. Where can we keep up with you? Who should we mention right now? Give me all the rundown.
Yeah, sure. I've got, I would hate to forget anybody, but I've just got a huge thanks to Dave Mason and Mason Sound for being with me this one since I was 9 years old. The Wessler brothers, Matt Bradshaw, man, Tammy and Lanny Oranger. These are just families that have become friends and sponsors of me. And then obviously KM2 Lubricants has been on my car, I think, since 2013 or 14 now. So we've had a pretty long, extensive relationship. And, just the whole KO Motorsports program with Roadworks, Fitzgerald Peterbilt on the side of my car, and all their pit crew, the guys that have been in my shop, not getting paid, just doing it for the love of the sport. I mean, you obviously have to perform on the racetrack, but without all those people, it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Paul, thanks for the time today.
All right, man. See you later.